With me today to discuss is the Director of the Threat Information Office from the Center for Security Policy, Kyle Shideler. Kyle, thanks for joining me.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So much of our focus right now in America is on the fight against ISIS. But given this attack, how much of a threat is the Taliban posing to us?
Well, you know, the problem we're facing with the Taliban in Afghanistan is very similar to the problem we're now facing with ISIS, which is to say, having left the battlefield with U.S. and NATO troops leaving, very quickly ISIS took over the gains that we had made. Same too also in Afghanistan, where we are seeing the Taliban taking over or controlling almost all of the southern Afghanistan districts, so much so that British troops have said that they're going to have to go back into the fight to try and resecure some of the areas that they lost so many lives over. So this is an example of a lack of American presence. And of course, obviously, we have troops still in the region. They're still at risk, but they're not in a position to use American might to defeat our enemy. And it is still our enemy, despite statements made by, for instance, Vice President Biden, who said that Taliban is not our enemy per se. Yes, Vice President, it is.
And in your opinion, would this situation have been different if President Obama hadn't pulled all of those troops out of Afghanistan, if we'd left a presence there to help stabilize the region so that radical Islamic terrorists or radical Islamic organizations couldn't take over the areas?
Well, part of our problem is we went into this with the idea that we would be able to stand up an Afghan government to counter the Taliban. But then we created a constitution for that country which enjoined Sharia law, the very same system of government for which the Taliban is fighting. So how can you ask the Afghan National Army to fight for the same idea as the Taliban? It's non-functional. We didn't go in there and offer them a different way of life. We offered them the same way of life the Taliban was offering them, and frankly, the Taliban does it better. So we have to, if we're going to enter a war of ideas, we have to have some of our ideas, and we have to stand behind American ideas and not this idea that we can promote Islamist politics, and as long as it's engendered democratically, then we're going to be okay with that. That's the root of our problem, ultimately.
Right, right. And like you said, we still have troops over there, even if it's not as large of a number as it used to be. But are we doing anything to stop the Taliban, or what are our troops doing over there if we're not actively fighting against these Islamic militants?
Well, you know, a district governor in Afghanistan recently said that they were not receiving the support that they felt they deserved from the Afghan national government. Reinforcements were not coming. Medvacs and other troop helicopters and such were not coming, and that foreign troops, meaning U.S. troops and other NATO troops, were doing nothing but essentially watching. Now, I'm sure, and I have no doubt in my mind, that that's not the desire of the American fighting man. The American fighting man, I'm sure, wants to take the fight to the enemy. But that's not the policy of this administration. The policy of this administration is to watch and to wait and to try and negotiate with the Taliban, which is what both the Afghan national government and the U.S. government has been attempting to do for several years now, to utter failure.
Now, in a recent interview, Senator Rand Paul questioned why the U.S. is there at all. He said there's not a clear-cut U.S. role in Afghanistan. He says that if we're going to go to war there needs to be a debate, maybe even in front of Congress. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's necessary?
Well, we still have the authorization for the use of military force against al-Qaeda and the Taliban, and they're still a threat, and they still need to be defeated. That said, however, if we aren't prepared to truly know this enemy, and we aren't prepared to give our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines the rules of engagement that will make this fight successful, then they're simply at risk. So we need to ask ourselves as a nation, what is our goal? How do we wish to accomplish this? You know,
right.
how are we going to take the fight to the jihadist enemy?
Right, and right now the goal seems to be helping train Afghan military forces, but are we still doing that? I mean, we've been there for 10 years. Have we accomplished any of the training that allows the Afghan forces to defend themselves?
Well, I haven't seen the evidence of that in Iraq, which was the same plan, which was to train and equip Iraqi soldiers, and we've seen them abandon places when facing the Islamic State. Now they're looking at going back into Ramadi, so we'll see how that pans out. But they've had to rely primarily on Shiite militias and Iranian assistance. So the question is, you know, whether we've trained them how to do the job, have we given them the ideological material to want to do the job? Or is it the case where on the one side you have dedicated jihadists in the Taliban and al-Qaeda who know what they believe and they know why they're on the battlefield, versus an Afghan National Guardsman who is there because it's what feeds his family, and he may stay on the battlefield and fight if he's got a Western advisor helping him, but once that's not there anymore, he simply melts away. That's the problem that we're facing, and until we're willing to discuss those issues, the issues at the heart of why these people are fighting, why we need to fight, then we're not going to get anywhere simply by teaching people how to fight.
All right, let's switch topics for a moment to another Islamic group, the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, there are reports that say 50% of Muslim mosques in the Western world have ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. First of all, do you think that that report is accurate?
Well, I don't know exactly what the percentage is. We know it's high. We know that there are a large number of mosques controlled by a variety of organizations associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. An example is the North American Islamic Trust, which was linked to Hamas in the Holy Land Foundation trial. Also, there are mosques that are linked to the Muslim Students Association. That was the case, for instance, in the San Bernardino Mosque of the Islamic Center of Riverside, where the shooter attended.
Now, how serious of an issue is this? These mosques, are they helping in the indoctrination of the homegrown radicals? Because these homegrown terrorists seem to be the new strategy that ISIS is implementing in fighting against us or against our allies, other Western countries around the world. How serious is it that mosques in our country have ties to a Muslim organization who wants to kill us?
Well, let's look at it like this. When the FBI filed their complaint against the third individual who helped the shooters get their weapons, one of the things they noted was that Saeed Farouk and this gentleman Marquez were examining material from two men primarily, Anwar al-Awlaki and Abdullah Azzam. Now, both those men are now al-Qaeda people. Azzam is dead and Anwar al-Awlaki is dead. We killed him with a drone strike. But they were originally Muslim Brotherhood individuals, and they taught and operated in and out of Muslim Brotherhood mosques in the United States and also in the UK and elsewhere. So the question you have is, is it the case where we have individuals who are indoctrinating, who are teaching jihad, and when they're here in the United States, they claim Muslim Brotherhood membership, and then later, when they transfer over to Yemen or what have you, they maybe move on to another jihadist organization. But it's the serious problem we have in this country is we're not examining why people go to jihad, why people believe jihad. So we have congressional hearing after congressional hearing about internet indoctrination. But the reality is that there's no one who goes onto the internet looking for Islamic State or al-Qaeda plans on how to build a bomb until after they've been taught what it means to go on jihad, what it means to desire a caliphate, what it means to establish Sharia law, and why that's a requirement doctrinally. And so that's the area of indoctrination where law enforcement and intelligence officials can begin to find these people if they're permitted to look. And the problem we have right now is that the Obama administration, and really to some extent the Bush administration, isn't permitting and weren't permitting individuals in the law enforcement and intelligence community to look at this area of indoctrination where changes can be made before violence breaks out.
Right. In other words, it's a human nature problem, not the medium which carries the message. I think that's a really good point, because there's something vulnerable in these individuals that cause them to be able to relate, if you will, to the idea of jihad or to the idea of what's being promised to them by radical Islamic terrorists. And if we examine that, you're saying, then we'd have a better idea of how to stop it rather than killing the messenger, which is just going out and looking on the internet. I think that's a very good point, and I wish that we were doing more of that. Kyle, I appreciate you coming on the program tonight. We are out of time, but thanks for being here.